welcome back to the Metalheads podcast. I'm your host Faye, and today we will be looking at metal academia. My guest today is David Burke, a PhD student studying metal. I mean, how cool is that? He's also a promoter, a musician, and he's editor for Astral Noise zine, so go and check those out. Really nice guy. We had a really interesting chat about metal, how it relates to the occult and horror themes, and we also dived into the lyrical content of metal music compared to non-metal music. Super interesting, and we had a real laugh at the end with my recurring question in gift or curse. So, like and share and tweet and all that good stuff, and I hope you enjoy. Today I am joined by David Burke. Would you like to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, sure. So I study a PhD at Bath Spa University in sunny England, where I'm interested in the sort of underlying themes of metal music and culture, and I approach this through a variety of kind of sociological methods. So I've got four empirical evidence bases in my PhD. But then once I've assembled those, I look at metal from a philosophical and increasingly psychoanalytic points of view, with lots of reference to things like existentialism, Hegelian thought, and postmodernist analysis as well, which I think we're going to get into in a minute. So I do a sort of mix of theory and sociology studying around heavy metal.
I think that's fascinating that you can I love that you study metal and like go into depth about it. I think that's really cool. If I could maybe redo my time at uni or
Mm.
go on to do something like that, I think I would because I did psychology, but I think what you do is super interesting. But it's not just that you do. You're an editor for Astral Noise.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I have other bits and pieces. So I edit a zine, Astral Noise. I'm in a few bands that occasionally do things, mostly very local. I promote as well. I run a festival in Southampton, which is coming up to its third run round this year.
Oh, which
Um,
festival? What's it called?
so it's called Abyssal Festival, and it's doom and slow metal focused.
Mhm.
And we've got people like Famine and Bismuth and The Grey, Tomb and Doom Band playing so far, and we've got a few more people on the lineup to announce as well. It's a lovely event. We really enjoy running it. So yeah, I'm round and about in metal, but the kind of focus of my work is writing for sure.
Mhm. Wow, so you've got the whole spectrum. You're a musician promoting and you're studying it. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all right. No, I mean, but it's it for a long time I was just studying it,
Hmm.
right? When I was at university doing my undergraduate, I did history, and I wrote about doom metal in my dissertation, and then again for my master's dissertation. But I wasn't really in the scene at that point. Like I I had never, well, I had been in a band at school, but I wasn't properly getting out there, going to gigs really frequently and so on. I didn't really get into that until sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and I've been sort of very eagerly trying to push into the scene since then.
I love that it's your entire life. That's I love that. That's dedication. That's amazing.
Well, you say the thing about it is the more it's become my life in totalis, the more I've realised that there are other sides to life.
Hmm.
But at the same time, and I think this is something that I carry through my thought a lot, is that metal persists even when you have other things to be getting on with in your life. That this thing draws you. It's not that it's constantly there, but it draws you back, I think, or there's a kind of repetitiveness to it,
Mm.
um, and that's obviously played out in the actual music itself, where there's lots of repetition in the riffs and in the albums. You know, you've got so many bands that just release the same basically releasing the same record over and over again. And so yeah, as I've investigated further into this music, I mean, because when you study anything, you find things that you don't like, right?
Yeah.
You know, you get too close to the object, suddenly you can see every blemish, every issue, right? But in that process, although I've looked at metal very hard and found lots of things, oh, this is not, you know, this doesn't scan with the idealism that I had when I was getting into the PhD, for instance, or when I was a young teenage fan. But at the same time, it's hooked me. I'll
Hmm.
never leave. Even I might look outside sometimes for a minute, but I'm suckered in now.
I know the feeling, like it's, yeah, you're exactly right. I have days where I'm like, right, I don't feel like listening to metal today. Like it's part of my job. Like I listen to metal all the time and I love it, but I want something else. It's like a palate cleanser. And then after that day, I'm like, I miss metal. And I just put on the most brutal thing that I can find. So you're right, it does, it draws you back in again. Now, I've had the honor of reading an article that you're working on.
Well,
Um,
firstly, thank you very much. I was just saying, you know, it's hard enough to get the people who are meant to be reviewing it to read it. So, you know, so it's very much appreciated
oh, I
that you
read it on my
giving us
lunch
your
break
time.
at work yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're doing very well, thank you. It was very, very interesting. Obviously it's not published or anything yet, so I'm not going to like directly quote it. But I've made some notes on it, and I picked out a couple of interesting things that I'd maybe like you to expand on a little bit.
Great.
Um,
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah. So you start in the start of your article, you mentioned that heavy music started as an inversion of previous popular cultures.
Hmm.
Could you
Hmm.
explain that?
Right. Okay. So when so heavy metal takes one thing that I think heavy metal does, and this is something that other scholars talk about as well, is that it it is a negation, right? It takes everything that is meant to be good and flips it upside down. So you see that very and this is, I think, most obvious through things like the upside down cross, the Satanism, which is not a universal constant. When you go to countries where Christianity is not the dominant religion, metal changes, and it's often less anti-Christian, more anti, let's say in Nepal, it's anti-Hindu
Hmm.
there because it's about, for a lot of people who are in making metal and listening to it, there's this act of whatever you say, I'm going to do the opposite.
Hmm.
And so you've got all of this very upbeat music that's being released in the late 60s. Now, obviously, some of this does have, you know, real substance and critique of its own in parts, but a lot of it is very happy. So the first thing that made me realize that I could study metal, that I could take this seriously, was a documentary on the BBC in about 2009 when I was like 15. And there was a little bit in there where all of these, now some of them now dead metal musicians like John Lord from Deep Purple, Rob Halford from Judas Priest, I think Ozzy or Bill Ward from Black Sabbath also say something to the effect of that the going to San Francisco with flowers in their hair, which was, you know, a very popular song of that moment, it just didn't fit with living in the Midlands or
Hmm.
really living anywhere in England, you know, like but by the time the winter rolls around, I think, as John Lord points out, you know, it's not good to be wearing a caftan and sandals when the temperature's plummeting. But I think the crucial thing here, right, is that metal is not just yes, it's inverting. It's taking symbols and flipping them upside down. But my contention in this article is that that happens as a response to something that's happening historically in the 1950s and 60s, and really something that emerges after the end of the Second World War,
Mm.
which is a new kind of capitalism that up to that point had not been the center of how the global economy worked. But especially from the 1960s onwards, we now live in an economic condition called postmodernity.
Yeah.
And one of the things about postmodernity is that basically the products that are available and the messaging of dominant ideology is overall positive. Even companies and even governments and so on promote the ideology of love. Let's put it like that: love and happiness and good vibes. Yeah.
Rainbows and puppies and kittens. Yeah.
Right, and I think and whether you're whether you're phrasing that in a flippant way, oh, it's going to be happy and lovely forever, or whether you're taking it very serious and phrasing it, well, we really must do everything as much as we can to protect and care for and even then, that's now this imperative towards not just doing the right thing, as was very common in previous forms of capitalism, where the imperative is to obey. Now the imperative is to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And metal takes issue with this, basically. It says, well, if we're going to enjoy ourselves, where's the grit? Where's the rabid glee, I guess, of enjoying too much, right? And that's what metal does as a kind of historical intervention, is introduce darkness back into a system which is now focusing more on happiness, love, and light.
It was interesting when I read your article, because you mentioned it's not just the music itself, it's the imagery, it's the logos that metal bands have, it's the language around. I was thinking, like, on metal Twitter, for example, you see if someone doesn't write, oh, I really like this song, it's like, oh, this fucks, or this slaps. It's like, it's just so aggressive, and it's like, you wouldn't talk about pop music like that. It's also the imagery, like the album art, it's just the more gruesome, it's like an inversion of the sort of mainstream, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and I think the now psychologically, I think the interesting thing about metal's emphasis on violence and this symbolic inversion is that metal has, in common parlance, metal has no chill. Metal cannot repress the violence of society. And the people that make metal are shocked by the violence of society, in lots of them are, or they are delighted by it in some of the more performative cases of black metal performers, let's say. But on the whole, either they cannot or they refuse to repress this violent content, which is actually the stuff of capitalism. Right, so for all of these bands making songs about love, peace, and happiness, Woodstock, etc., all of this is undergirded by the fucking war machinery of the US military-industrial complex and their conquest for oil all around the world. Yeah, so and I think metal musicians cannot overlook that.
Yeah.
Where other musicians perhaps are either choosing to not focus on that, or defining themselves as somehow, oh, well, that's happening, but I'm not that. Even when I am the beneficiary of the music system that is actually supported by global capitalism, I am not that thing. I am the rebel inside the system. I have this opportunity to say the right thing. I think of someone like Bob Dylan as someone like that, right? But Bob Dylan still phrases his critiques of society in a way that is socially acceptable, and because metal can't repress its violence in the same way, it comes out in socially unacceptable forms. So rather than Bob Dylan, like Masters of War, which is a very erudite song about militarism, you've got War Pigs by Black Sabbath, which is just on the nose,
just
right out the gate. Generals bad, war bad. There's no ambiguity, and most importantly, there's no subtlety to it.
Because in your article focuses on sort of the connection between metal and the occult,
Mm.
and the connection between that. And I also feel like, do you feel like that could also be applied to other areas like horror, for example? You see a lot of metal heads, they love horror films, gory games. I think could you think that the same thing could be applied to that?
I think they're directly correlated.
Yeah.
I think they're basically the same. Um, they're the same psychic mechanism, or
Hmm.
the same rough psychic profile, or whatever you want to call it. There's something that links those genres and those practices very much. And I also would extend that in a slightly more limited way to things like sci-fi,
Hmm.
especially the more horrific end of sci-fi, certainly. um, all other fantasy genre fiction, um, and Gothic literature, I think, also very it gets very close to this as well. But metal and horror are particularly apt for each other, and
Hmm.
also horror gaming, which is later development. But I think most people still think of horror gaming really as just a subgenre of horror film, in some ways. Obviously, I'm sure loads of gamers are now very upset about that. The way that so many horror games are written is written in the style of a horror movie. They use all the tropes of horror movies and so on.
Yeah,
Um,
and they're heavily inspired by sort of classic horror
yeah,
cinema. So yeah, I think it's
exactly.
fair to say that.
But I think they are directly related.
Yeah.
I think because horror film likewise or fails to repress.
Hmm.
It does not repress. It tries to, in a way, it tries to dredge the stuff of nightmares up
Hmm.
and sort of drag that into our window of understanding, into our conscious.
Yeah,
And broadly, I think that's something that metal does too.
I would agree. There's quite a few studies. I remember when I studied psychology at university, I studied I did my dissertation was in like circadian rhythms, dreaming, sleep, that kind of stuff. But I did something about dream content as well, and I focused on horror and music. And I remember
Mm.
reading a study that people who listen to violent music, play violent video games, watch horror films, their survival reflexes are much how can I put this, more acute. Their stress responses are much more sort of efficient. You're less prone to panic in a stress situation because your brain has practiced these things through sort of passive means of watching a film or playing a game or listening to music, but it's like you've trained your brain in some way to respond to these very quite extreme, often violent, graphic things.
The way I think about it is that horror and metal are for everybody, but but a lot of people need a push.
Mm,
One What you said about that psychology paper you were reading is really interesting, but I would counterbalance it with, so many of the metalheads I know have mental health problems, are shut-ins, are poorly socialized. So maybe there's a kind of balancing act where these people are actually more prone to stress than perhaps the average repressive person, but then train themselves to deal with stress responses better through violent media. And
yeah.
I think,
I, yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because, like you said, yeah, a lot of I think I talked about this in one of my previous episodes. A lot of metalheads, I think we have that thing in common with that we've been through something, some kind of trauma, some kind of something that's really affected us, and we've chosen to listen, we've chosen to have this sort of catharsis of whatever has happened to us through the music we listen to. So
mm,
we don't have to be angry and aggressive all the time. Yeah, a lot of the metalheads I know have got, we're in therapy or we've had something or they're on medication because, yeah,
I
or
went to
they're,
therapy today.
yeah, I go to therapy, I don't, it's a positive thing, but
Mm.
it is a signal of, we've been through something.
Now,
And
now what I would add to that is everyone has been through something.
This is true.
That is a universal condition, in
Hmm.
fact. Now, in the kind of psychoanalysis that I like reading,
Hmm.
so I read a lot of Jacques Lacan,
Yeah.
and one of his ideas is that, and I think Freud also has this, that basically as soon as you enter into language, as soon as you can speak, that what you lose as you learn to speak is a feeling of oneness, basically a feeling of connection to other things that exists precisely because you can't tell the difference between yourself and another thing.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can talk, you lose this sense of oneness. And frankly, hippies spend their entire lives trying to get that back, right? That's what
Yeah.
but so it's not that everyone has been through something.
Yeah.
Even if you've had the most privileged life imaginable, you can still be alienated, and in fact you always will be. But the difference with metal is that we acknowledge the trauma.
Yeah.
We don't repress it. Now if
Exactly.
it's the it, we choose to pull it out and work through it a little bit and use media to catharsize or to inhabit that feeling and let it kind of really sit with us. Like
Hmm.
I think a lot of doom metal, especially the sort of more melancholic funeral sides of things, that is about sitting with your bad feeling
Yeah.
for a while. So and that's a non-repressive approach to trauma, and I think that is the separation
Yeah.
between metal fans and others. Now, I know lots of metalheads who also are not particularly emotionally sensitive,
Hmm.
but even when we think of our stereotypical boomer metal dad,
Yeah.
right? Even even he can't repress, which is why the anger just comes out.
Mm.
Is just on the surface. Um there's no subtlety, again, to return to it. There's no subtlety, and there's no like um there's much less masking of how one feels.
Yeah.
So even when metalheads aren't necessarily the most emotionally self-aware, they're still, the feelings are on the surface. The
Yeah.
feelings come through immediately, I think. Metal doesn't do charades in that sense. It doesn't. There's less of these social games
Hmm.
where where the emotions and the investments of the players are actually somewhat indistinct. Because metal is not subtle, it's almost like everybody's playing with their hands on the table.
Hmm.
To use a poker, let's use a poker analogy,
Yeah.
where there's much less gamesmanship in metal compared to other fandoms where you know it, other fandoms like indie rock, it's all about subtlety. It's
Hmm.
all about how gracefully one conveys an emotional expression that is really quite complicated, let's say, but you convey it with a few words in a lyric that refer to a common phrase or something that gets you to understand all of the emotional complexities of that thing,
Mm.
but it doesn't point to it directly. It leaves
Yeah.
you to, yeah. uh, Whereas metal lyrics, so many metal lyrics, and I've spent last year, I part of my PhD was analyzing the differences between metal lyrics and non-metal lyrics.
Oh wow.
And I took 85 metal records and
Hmm.
all the lyrics off those, and then I took 85 non-metal records and took all the lyrics off them, and
God.
compared how many times each word or short phrase appears.
Oh, that's
And
fascinating.
it's called content analysis.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
I did
it,
that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things that you find is that metal musicians and writers like talking about objects. They like pointing at something and going, "Look, it's big and it's scary."
Yeah.
You know, whereas non-metal lyrics are about the subtleties, the complexities of interpersonal relationships. You
Mhm.
made me feel this way. Maybe I will leave because of this. Maybe it's that. Maybe I don't know. There's lots of ambiguity and shades of meaning
Mhm.
in non-metal lyrics, and lots of them are about talking to each other. Whereas metal lyrics are much less about talking to each other and much more about describing often a horrifying object.
Mhm. Oh wow. That must have taken you a long time.
Yeah, I'm still doing it actually.
Oh wow.
But
That's
I
that's
just got
amazing.
sorry, I just got to the point where I'm making graphs now.
Oh right. Oh Christ. I
Yeah.
remember doing lots of SPSS analysis at university.
So I did all of this on Excel, and then my supervisor told me, "Mate, you should really learn SPSS."
Yeah.
uh, and by that point, I was like, "Well, I've been working on this for like the best part of a year, so I don't think I will now."
I had the exact I had the exact same thing with my tutor. I had all these like graphs and Excel spreadsheets, and he was like, "This is 1 month's work. You've got like 11 months left. How many fucking spreadsheets do you want?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't know any other way." And he's like, "Right, go to this class and learn SPSS for your own like sanity." I'm like, "Okay." So I've still got this massive folder of all my notes about SPSS and different like the data and stuff. I've still got it on my shelf.
Yeah, I wish I knew some of that shit because I had to uh, I've been doing this all what is called in academia sui generis, which
Hmm.
means I pulled it out of my arse. Um, um, and it's been in some ways it's been a rough ride, but the findings from that have been utterly fascinating. Do you mind if I share a couple
Oh,
of sort of
absolutely.
so
Please do.
so that one of the things that I found is that metal lyrics are about death and blood and fire and pain and hell. Those words turn up a lot. Now, that's not very surprising. So I don't know why I led with that really, but there were some really surprising findings, and one of them was the number of words relating to seeing as opposed to saying. Now,
Okay.
this is kind of what I was talking about just before.
Hmm.
Metal lyrics, often the narrator asks you to behold or look at this thing, or maybe it's a metaphor about I can see while others are blind, or I have been blinded. I can no longer see. Sight, looking, is very important in metal, and I think that is also to do with how it relates to the world as a series of horrifying objects,
Hmm.
basically. And metal is constantly asking us to gaze upon the thing, behold that thing, whereas non-metal lyrics, as I said, are about conversations. To quote from Limp Bizkit, it's all about the he said she said bullshit in non-metal. It's about talk.
Yeah.
Whereas Fred Durst can only refer to that derisively in his song, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, he's to and for him, I guess let's lean in now. The In Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit. What is happening there? He's referring to the world as a series of not as a series of social situations where people, subjects are interrelating, but actually as a series of stuff what can be broke.
Hmm. Absolutely.
um, some other findings were, and these add to my hypothesis about how metal relates to philosophy, is that there are loads of words about, frankly, about big philosophical questions that turn up in metal much more than they do in non-metal. And these are words like life, world, earth, spirit, soul. Oh, dreams, human, law, thoughts, minds, and lots. and then some interestingly Nietzschean ones as well, like will is very, very prominent. And
Hmm.
maybe that reflects a kind of surety of intent. I will do this, I will do that. But maybe it's also a Nietzschean thing about the will to power.
Yeah.
Um, and also rise, which is a very kind of Nietzschean idea, the sense of overcoming and rising above,
Yeah.
which is something for instance Pantera lean very heavily on,
Hmm.
is the idea. They have a song called Rise, and I read a book, I reviewed a book a few years ago called Heavy by Dan Franklin. It's about various kinds of heaviness. And he
Hmm.
has a chapter in there where he compares Phil Anselmo to the Nietzschean figure, who's someone who has lots of rises and falls, and and often is the person both dragging himself up and then pulling himself down.
Yeah.
You know, like when he did things that were extremely unpleasant, that's him sticking the knife in. Nobody else was doing that to Phil. That was Phil.
Yeah.
but but then at the same time, he's also this guy who's like who's overcome heroin addiction, put himself through X, Y, and Z. So there's a strong kind of I think there's a very strong Nietzschean theme in metal, and obviously I'm not the first person to say that. Loads of bands have talked about Nietzsche,
Hmm.
and there's even an article from 2009 where one of the greats in metal studies, this woman called Dina Weinstein, she writes an article about how metal is Nietzschean very much. But
Wow.
it's cool. But it's cool to find that also in data. That was exciting.
Yeah. That I'd like to read that article. That sounds interesting.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you. Studying metal sounds amazing.
It is pretty good.
Yeah.
Now there are some downsides. I had to leverage my privilege to be able to do this very much, very much because I'm not being funded to
Right,
do this
okay.
PhD. I'm being supported to be able to do this.
Hmm.
Um, and there are people out there that are doing other PhDs on metal, and maybe some of them have funding. But I think it would be hard with my kind of project to to get funding, because I'm trying to do something that's very kind of broad. And to be honest, most funding bodies are not interested in macro projects at this point.
Right,
Um,
okay.
that they want real kind of, they want focus, and to be honest, they also want something topical.
Hmm.
Certainly if you're going to be doing weird fringe cultural studies that isn't prestigious,
Yeah.
because people writing about, let's say, um, Cleopatra or the kings and queens of England, that's always going to get funding. There's going to be some ancient institution or funding body that's going to say, yes, we will definitely put the money in for that. But metal doesn't have that yet, because metal's only 53.
Who wants to hear about kings and queens like yawn? We know all about them. They're not that interesting.
Well, and if we're going to have kings and queens, I'd rather have them represented through the form of a metal band,
100%.
right? Like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have actually having to learn about Henry VIII, or would you prefer the Rick Wakeman Henry VIII and His Six Wives prog rock album from 1973?
I mean, there's no choice. There's no choice.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be able to study metal and
Hmm.
certainly study it in this way. But at the same time, it's now a field that has skin in the game.
Yeah.
Metal Studies now has a journal. It has a conference. I'm going to the conference this year.
Oh,
Very
wow.
very exciting. It's in Canada. I've never been to Canada.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
I hear they have a new way of eating chips, cheese, and gravy that I'm going to try over and over again.
It's called poutine.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it,
I've
but
seen videos. It looks odd, but I can imagine it tastes good because the ingredients taste good.
yeah, exactly. And it's just chips, cheese, and gravy, which
Yeah,
I've had in the UK, and this one looks better, but I can't tell yet. So we're gonna find out. But
amazing.
but yeah, but metal now has metal now has kind of metal studies even, sorry, now has its claws in the side of academia properly. And that's a
Wonderful.
good and that's a good, in some ways that's a very good thing, because it means sooner or later, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 15 years, there are going to be undergraduate, at least modules on
Mm,
heavy metal that you will find in lots of universities.
I
Maybe
really hope that.
I think that's going to be a thing, probably within certainly within my lifetime, and probably within like the first 20 years of my career. I don't think it's very far off. And that's going to be amazing, because
Hmm.
in some ways, because metal is going to be totally legitimate. This genre has spent 50 years being firstly denigrated by journalists,
Yeah.
then considered the instigators of a moral panic, and they're turning your kids into Satanists or whatever. then it's then it's this really, really dark thing in the 90s, where it's getting associated with Columbine, but also there's real
Mm,
murders happening in
yeah.
the Helvet scene and so on. And now it's boring. But maybe metal being boring is the same moment that it also becomes truly respected. For instance, also last year there was, during one of the proms, they an orchestra briefly played a Slipknot song.
I saw that. Yeah,
So
that's amazing.
imagine the metalheads of the 70s and 80s
Mm.
seeing that. Like it's them in the way back when would have never envisaged that.
How much of a community there is now. It's not just, oh, there's one person in my school who likes metal and they're sort of the outcast black sheep. It's like there's a community and we talk about it and it's slowly getting more accepted. Like not everyone's gonna like metal, that's fine. It is extreme in its nature, but I hope that it becomes more, there's not that sort of, oh, have you not grown out of it yet? That kind of mentality. Like I still get
Yeah.
that as a 30-year-old, people still ask me, oh, you still like that? Didn't you like that as a teenager? And I'm like, yeah, because I like it. It's not just a phase for some
Hmm.
people. It is an actual love and a passion and a genuine interest.
Metal is currently popular, and metal goes in and out of popularity fairly stably.
Yeah,
Kind of has it frequently has a sort of 10 years on, 10 years off kind of thing. And right now it's having its on years. It
yeah,
you know it, it turned up in Stranger Things, and people know who Metallica are now, and so on. And but at the same time, I think overall metal is only going to get more and more accepted and more brought in.
yeah.
But so that means that we have to take the question to the people that do think metal is this kind of fully negative, fully antagonistic force. We have to go to them and say, well, your position really isn't holding up very well anymore. You know,
Yeah.
and that means that we have to reconsider. If we do that, we have to reconsider what metal is actually about,
Hmm.
because that means metal can't be this pure negativity, this utter destructive force, right? We have to characterize it, I think, more as I try to do in the article that you've read, which is metal is a contradiction inside the system.
Yeah.
Metal is the point where the orders break, where order breaks down, but within the order.
Yeah.
Basically, it's not a radical outside force that emerges out of hellfire and pure hatred in the dead of night or whatever, lovely as though that may be. it it emerges from the very stuff of normality. And that means it's more like a contradiction and as metal gets more and more legitimated and more accepted, it will maintain this contradictory position, even though it loses its veneer of radical negativity.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you very, very much. And like I said, I implore people when your article actually does get released. I don't know when that's going to be, to read it and to follow you on Twitter. What's your handle
Hmm.
on Twitter?
My handle on Twitter and also on YouTube
Hmm.
is metal_analysis. Metal analysis.
Right, well,
Um,
go and check out because all this stuff you talked about is just like a fraction of what you do, and it's fascinating. And your article, which I have read, like I've said, was I'm a metal nerd, so when people really go into depth with it, I really enjoy reading about it. Um,
um,
but thank you very much for talking, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to play a little game just to
yeah,
end the episode.
please. Well, firstly,
It's a
thank you very much for having me. But yes, please,
Oh, you're
absolutely. What's the
very
game?
welcome. But yeah, I play this game with all of my guests, all the musicians, friends, family members I've had on here.
Hmm.
It's a game called Gift or Curse. So I'm gonna name five things that just are in the world, and you have
Yes.
to rationalize or just say if you think that this thing is a gift for the world or a curse upon the world.
Oh, you're gonna get some odd answers from me, given what we were just talking about. But let's go.
So I pick five just random things. It's different. I have one recurring one which I ask everybody, which gets some very interesting answers.
Good.
But that'll be number five. So number one, something quite relevant in metal at the minute is merch cuts at venues, the percentages they take, gift or curse.
Oh, well, yeah, I am partisan. That's undeniably a curse for metal musicians, isn't it? Now, no, I mean, yeah, it's just
Yeah,
you can't see much of a gift in there. It's just horrendous capital exploitation.
I would 100% agree with that. I think I was talking to my friend the other day. I think I used the word abhorrent. Um, so yeah, I would have to
Yeah,
agree with that.
that shit fucking sucks. Like,
Hmm.
have you seen the prices? Everyone's seen the Gajira prices from earlier this year. It's
Yeah,
like, it's really bad.
it is.
I remember I went to see Tool last year, and it was at the big O2 venue, what used to be the
Hmm.
Millennium Dome in London, and it was fucking like 65 quid for a hoodie. Uh,
Ridiculous. Yeah.
and it was very, very annoying. That the whole modern experience of going to a big arena gig is
Mm,
very annoying.
yeah,
But the prices are just taking a piss at this point.
definitely,
Oh,
definitely a
yeah.
curse. So number two, something which also divides opinion: pineapple on pizza, gift or curse.
I don't abstain. I don't care. I think it's probably a gift for, it's a gift for the people that like it. It's a curse. It's also a curse for the people who like it. Let me explain why. It's for the people who like it, it's an eternal curse because they constantly have to suffer the non-pineapple on pizza crowd. This is the contradiction, right? They have to, in order to affirm, you have to set yourself up in relation to what you are not.
Hmm.
And so all the people who are like, oh, I don't like pineapple on pizza, they feel the need to get up in the business of people who do like it, and vice versa. So I think it's a gift and a curse.
I am 100% one of those people. If you put fruit in my pizza, I will murder you. So if I
Right.
find that one of my friends he puts pineapple on his pizza, and I rip the shit out of him every single time, and I will
I mean,
continue to do
I
so
that's you
until
should.
I die.
Good. Now I have a horrible take, which is that I think pizza's actually kind of overrated.
That's also fair enough. I mean, that in itself
It's
is controversial.
I think it's like it's all right. Like if I wanted to eat, the way I tend to think about fast food is how much protein can I buy for X amount of money? Um, and for that reason, kebab always wins. Kebab destroys other forms of
Oh, I
fast
mean,
food.
if you're talking protein ratios, absolutely. Or
That's
KFC, I guess.
Oh, fuck yeah. But pizza to me, like I see it as like this is just a very fancy toasty that you're presenting to me. I mean, it's very nice, but
Wow, you've got a really good point.
now I think that's probably me just being very biased about bad takeaway pizza because when you go to Italy and get it proper thin, that's a different world.
Oh, I can imagine.
That's a
Yeah,
different world when it's really, really thin and you picked the vegetables that morning,
yeah, that's.
then pizza's top shit. Like
But
fine.
like, I'm thinking like greasy, like Dominoes, like you can wring the oil out of it, that kind of.
Oh, oh, mate, no.
All right, so You abstain from that one. Number 3, outdoor music festivals. Gift or curse?
That's a really good one, because I think a lot of people that attend outdoor music festivals are not doing it because they want to camp for 3 nights and walk around a lot and get their feet hurt. They're doing it because it's the best value way of catching about 50 bands in one go.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like bulk buying.
yeah, that's exactly right. It's like going to Costco.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's very similar, and for like, but on the other hand, there's something just wonderful about the watching music in the open air. There is something lovely about that. Like there's no even though you're still enframed, you still know that you're watching a concert, and you still act like a crowd, as if you were in a room, by and large. But there is something lovely, I think, especially even when the weather's shit. There is something kind of wonderful about hearing very, very loud music out in the open air, and feeling the scale of the thing as the sound travels for hundreds of meters. Maybe there is something lovely about that.
That's fair enough. I mean, for me personally, like a 1 day outdoor concert, I that's amazing. Like you said, the
Mhm.
outdoor experience, so especially like in the evening when like it's just that it's quite romantic in a way, isn't it?
Very much, yeah.
A 3 day festival where I cannot like pee on a proper toilet or have a shower or just be a human, not gonna happen. I'm way too much of a princess. Um,
I'm very willing to suck it up and not wash for 3 days. I
oh.
like being clean. Don't get me wrong, but I do. I, I promise. But you suck it up for the 3 days. But I also think, and this is kind of crucial, especially to metal festivals, there is a lot of fun in being filthy for a few days, and just the
I guess
gay
it.
the gay abandon of it all. You
Yeah.
know, and now when I went to, I think that kind of sort of reckless disregard is wonderfully played out in metal festivals because of all the stupid games that get played.
Mm.
Like, do you know about Bloodstock and the various games that get played at Bloodstock?
I've heard a few
Yeah, yeah,
stories, yeah.
yeah. So they have a kind of a wonderful sort of violent Olympics that
Mm.
happens every year, and that doesn't happen anywhere else.
It's not
And
happening at Coachella, is it?
no, and in a
No.
way, I think that's because people lean into, oh yeah, we're gonna do anything we want. So I remember, this is perhaps one of the funniest things that I've ever witnessed. I was at Bloodstock. I've got these friends. They're drinking a horrible cocktail out of yard glasses. The yard glasses are
Oh, yeah.
these really long things, right?
Hmm.
And they can hold more than a liter, and no, more than 2 liters, I think. And they're chugging through this disgusting cocktail called Lucozade Port. One bottle of port, one bottle of Lucozade, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really bad. So they're drinking all that, and then it's time for lunch. And one of them gets out this chili in a can, chili con carne in a can, that he had purchased at Vacan 3 years previously.
Oh.
And before I quite know what I'm doing, I'm suddenly shouting at my mate, and one of my other friends gets it at the exact same moment. We start shouting, "Yard of chili! Yard of chili!"
Oh no.
And he opens the can, and the chili goes in the yard glass, and suddenly all nearly 20 of us that were at the camp had a sip. Everyone participated pretty much. And at one point, the guy whose can it was, he turns to me and he says, "This is what it's all about," him referring to the metal festival. "This is what it's all about. Total freedom." And I think that is the thing about open air music festivals, is that it is total freedom, but at the
Yeah.
same time you are impoverished in that act of total freedom.
Wow.
That story if that does not make it into my thesis, I will be so upset.
Number 4 on my list. Crocs. Gift or curse?
So I own Crocs, right?
Hmm.
I've got a pair. I think now fashion Crocs being worn as fashionable shoes, which is currently happening for the second time in my life. Um, because I remember the first time, and it was pretty bad in 2009 when it was happening then.
Mm.
Now it's happening again, but this time, have you noticed that the Crocs are chunkier? They've got like a platform. They now do platform Crocs,
Oh, wow.
basically, that you can. So there's some options there. They're still the fucking ugliest commercially available shoe. Like I maybe the only thing worse are those well, UGG boots are pretty bad. I'm not very keen on them. I don't like most. Yeah, they're pretty bad,
They're
but
awful.
they're aesthetically terrible.
Yes.
Practically extremely good.
I do get the
Gift
practical
gift or
value
curse
of them.
gift or curse though, obviously a curse because they're just another plastic piece of crap.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what would be better if every town everywhere had a clogs making workshop and
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
had clogs.
Yeah, that's very true.
That would be cool.
I definitely think they're a curse. They're
Yeah,
hideous.
they are hideous.
I don't own any. I don't want to own any. I understand people that do own them. They're practical, blah blah blah. Just the worst.
Hmm.
Have you seen the band Undeath? Have you seen they've got some merch with Crocs on because the singer he loves Crocs.
and and this I think is another. This is also interesting, right? Like now bands have to be do a lot of gimmicking now,
Mm,
it's a big part of being a band that's coming up is that you have to do social media bullshit.
yeah,
And the guy likes Crocs.
he
That's
does.
gonna set them apart in some way. They can be the band that's like, look, we'll do you a Croc pin. Nobody else is doing a Croc pin.
They do sell
uh,
them, I think.
I mean, and that's really interesting for me because one of the things I've noticed across my studies is how there's now a metal merchandise version of basically every item in existence.
Hmm.
Last year I saw Belphegor selling a hot sauce at a gig. Um,
Oh, I've
uh,
noticed this trend of extreme metal bands making coffee.
yeah, there's coffees
Have you seen
now.
that? Like Cannibal Corpse have some,
Wow.
Possessed make some. They also have hot sauce. Like
Hmm.
they're
So they,
branching out into like cookery. It's amazing.
yeah, and then last year I also found out about Liquid Death, which is a
Mm,
metal themed canned water brand.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I think,
it's
and
interesting.
it's well, and this is kind of it's some for me. These new commodities really sum up everything that we've been talking about before: the contradiction of metal and the society that surrounds it, but
Yeah,
also the way that metal is becoming increasingly accepted.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
give
now we've
us.
got to number 5, which is one that I ask everyone. And this has the answers vary wildly depending
Hmm.
on the gender of the person I'm asking,
Hmm.
and their sexual orientation.
Hmm.
So, number 5, flavored condoms, gift or curse?
Wow. Wow, that's the most thought-provoking question I've been asked all day.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm honored.
Flavored. I'm gonna say gift for a multitude of reasons. Actually, the first thing is that you can blow just like ordinary condoms. You can blow them up into real big balloons or water balloons and then drop them. So that's good. But unlike with a regular condom, with a flavored condom, when you pull it up through your nose and pull it down into your mouth via the sinuses, you get that strawberry flavoring. So that's very nice. So I think overall they're a gift. Um,
Wow.
Now, Now there might be some people out there that think flavored condoms are a curse, and I think, maybe there just need to be more flavors. Maybe you haven't found the right one yet. You
See,
know,
I've also had this discussion with my previous guest. You can get bacon flavored ones.
we're getting close. That's good. We're getting closer. But what I'm thinking about is maybe a kind of lobster thermidor, or perhaps a sort of stroganoff. Maybe a bouillabaisse, a fish soup condom might be nice. But certainly we need to kind of expand the market of flavors, because I think that's probably where people are getting lost. If they find it's a curse, it's probably because they haven't got the right flavor, and maybe it's because their sinuses aren't big enough and it's getting stuck while they try to get it through their nose and into their mouth. Personally, I have very big sinuses, so I've never really had any problem with that.
I'm actually crying.
Um,
Oh wow. See, I'm imagining I'm imagining like a date situation and you're just like, so I have lobster thermidor.
well, you get them out. You're like, well, here's starter, main, dessert. What are you thinking?
That's
You know,
amazing. So you're thinking there should be more variety, like a menu.
I'm thinking there should be a menu that's at least as complex as your average Chinese restaurant.
Oh wow.
I'm saying maybe 200 to 300 different flavors of condom, so that we can cater to every particular taste and get what we all want, which is more people tasting their own condoms. Because I think, especially if the men tasted the condoms, maybe they'd learn about what the other perspective is, and then we could all understand each other a little better. But the men, they like meat, they don't really like strawberries, I've heard. So you need to give them a flavor that they'll kind of resonate with. Maybe a sort of a beans on toast, actually. That's now
Maybe
that
like
is
a
that's a nasty ass flavor to
oh,
imagine on a condom. To be fair,
oh beans.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know that Tabasco make condoms. I don't know if they're joke condoms or if
fucking hell.
yeah.
That's you've
Imagine
got.
putting that on the wrong way by accident.
Well,
And
imagine
imagine
imagine receiving. That
imagine
sounds.
imagine being the oh no no see my personal opinion as a female who is heterosexual,
Mm,
fuck no, they should be booted into space and removed from as just everything. They're a curse.
sure. I think that's entirely fair, but I should put it to you: have you considered that maybe it's because you haven't found the right flavor yet?
See, this is a valid point, and the second that my boyfriend buys like a whole menu of this stuff, I will be willing to try, because
I've,
maybe it's just my tastes have not been expanded enough, clearly.
well, that's really good, because I am planning on starting that company as soon as we finish this call.
That sounds amazing. I would like to be a shareholder slash investor so we can outcompete Tabasco.
Well, it's Tabasco first, then Durex, and
Yes.
then after that, maybe we sort of take on the restaurant business as well. Like, maybe get people eating condoms, not just wearing them. I feel like there's a lot of kind of missed applications for this object. Um, if anyone has any suggestions on what to do with this, please at me at Metal Analysis on Twitter. Please let me know, what would you do to make flavored condoms more popular. Please
And,
let me know.
and please tag me in that at Death Metal Mum because I absolutely want to hear this. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been fascinating. I've learned a lot. I'm going to read the article you sent me. And that is probably my favorite answer to the flavored condoms question that I've ever had. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
well, you're welcome, and also thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure, kind of going over some of the things that I do, and hearing your perspective on it as well. Thanks very much.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I hope you have a good night.
You too. Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye.